Tell me when are you on already? Are we rolling?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Good. You
Okay.
can just talk and figure out. You can just edit out whatever you don't want.
All right. So you've got your new mentor.
Yeah.
Where are you going from there?
So I finish up Fleet Marine Force training, Cam Johnson, and it was right before graduation. It was like our last big test, and I forgot the staff sergeant's name that was in charge of us. So it was HM1 book, HM2 book at the time, and then the Marine Corps staff sergeant who was training us. They had to choose three corpsmen because there was a deployment coming up, and they took the most mature, most capable, and just best equipped. I happen to be one of them. H.N. Robinson and H.N. Poches were a part of that. It was us three. And that was because 3rd Battalion 8th Marines was about to deploy to Iraq. And so we had this time where HM2 Book pulled me to the side and he said, hey, there's this deployment coming up. And I know you said you want to deploy as soon as possible. However, it's not going to be easy deployment. The expectations is for a lot of casualties. And he's like, look, I know you can handle it. I know you're ready. But if you say you don't want to go, we'll find somebody else.
Really? Wow.
And I was like, no, if you think I'm best equipped, it's us three, and you guys are choosing us. The staff sergeant was a scout sniper that was training us, and HM2 at that time, I think he had 3 or 4 deployments on his belt. Purple Heart. Like, he'd seen it all. There was nothing that he didn't see.
So I'm interested because I was in Fort Bragg when Desert Shield deployed, like when it all hit the fan. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I was scared. Like, and maybe that's not a feeling you had. I didn't have a death wish, but we started going from just doing basic stuff to all of a sudden it was nuclear, biological, chemical, anti-tank, all this stuff. And, there are all these things about all the chemical, stuff that they were doing. Man, it was ramping up. And I was like, I had a little pucker factor going, going on inside. What was that like for you?
I was honored. And when I was chosen, you hear how I'm saying it. Like, I was chosen, right? And I don't know, it was, I know what it was now, but at that moment, I was just like, man, it's time for me to go. Like, I'm going to go see what this is really about.
We also had someone that respected you who chose you.
Yeah.
And that was not the predominance of your life.
No, it was interesting because it wasn't until I got, to the green side of the Navy, which is just the Marine Corps side. I started finding like men that I can look at and I can glean from. Wasn't always the best, but that's when I started finding men in my life that was really teaching me things, not just about survival, not just how to be a good corpsman, but like some man stuff. Like some how to become an independent man. I had a really good group of friends when I was with 3rd Battalion 8th Marines. We did a few deployments together, and I learned a lot from them. But once I left Fleet Marine Force training, I think a month later, we were in 29 Palms, California, training at the CAX, and that was kind of my first, like, okay, this is kind of real. Like, these Marines don't play. They put me with a mortar team, so I got to shoot some mortars and learn about how heavy the mortar plate is, and the mortars, and just like the different techniques and things, firing different types of mortars. And then they moved me to a line company, and I got to experience what it was like to be like a front of everything, moving quickly on your feet. And then my chief Buchanan, he looked at me and he said, man, we have this new unit that we have to stand up, and it's going to be a combination of the mortar T, all the different trucks, and we need a corpsman that can handle working by himself, You're not going to have anybody. It's just going to be you and I forgot how many, like 30. I think it was 30 at the end, like 30 Marines, because I was also helping with another unit with a really young corpsman. It was called Combat Train. And our job was to be the battalion's QRF. When something happened, we were there with a wrecker and we came out. So we were like 3/8 911. And I was honored. Again, you know, a man saw something and said, hey, and I remember with tears in his eyes, he said, you can say no. Because this is not going to be it's not going to be easy. And I feel like I'm sending you to the slaughter because of how many missions you're going to go on. And I remember he gave me his deployment knife. And he said, look, this was a knife that was given to me. I want you to carry it. And if you get some blood on it, don't wipe it off. Bring it back. But I did that deployment not really understanding what I was getting into, but fear was not a feeling that I had. I was excited, like really weird. I mean, when you grow up in a kind of a perpetual war zone, whether it's inside of the home or growing up in a rough environment or dealing with the race wars that I had to kind of navigate, I always felt like I was at war anyway. So fear was kind of like my normal. It actually hyped me up. Mm-hmm. It gave me energy. So,
and you were in control in a sense.
Yeah, because I mean, I could decide to either like fold or meet the energy with the energy that was needed. And God has always given me kind of the physical stamina and strength to be really athletic. So that helped. And I think because of the things that I had to deal with as a child and growing up in an environment that was always chaotic, it helped me to really be a good decision maker in chaos. So it made me a really good corpsman.
Right. So maybe just pick tell me a couple lessons or stories learned from the line. And I mean, I know these aren't easy, and I know you and I share this compartmentalization syndrome where we bury stuff, but if there's something you're comfortable with sharing.
I'll tell you a quote that my dad told me right before I left to Iraq. It was another one of those moments. I went home right before, and it was a moment me and him were sitting on the back porch. It was at night, and we looked up, and he said, son, I know what you're about to get into because I did 3 years in Vietnam. Not 3 terms, 3 years. And he said, one of the things that I used to do that would calm me down is I would look up at the moon. Because there's only one. And just know that every time you look up at that moon, I'm looking at the same one. And I remember crying. I mean, a little emotional now because it was also in those moments that I finally kind of like broke into this different space with him. From the day before I left to boot camp, from the times that I would come home, I stopped really like calling my mom. My mom would answer and I'd just be like, well, where's Dad? It's like there was a newfound respect and relationship that I longed for. And every time I went home, I wanted to be with him. I wanted to spend time with him, and we'd stay up late at night watching movies, drinking and smoking cigarettes and talking and laughing and listening to music. And it was just like us. But I remember him telling me that, and it brought me comfort. And I found myself in Iraq often just looking up when things were at its worst, where I had a lot going on. Different Marines had a lot of issues. I didn't lose one, but there were some mental breakdowns, some different things that being able to walk through things with some Marines, some of our really good friends. Some of my really good friends were killed. One thing that I've more recently started to really process is the same day that I was chosen to lead the combat train, to be the corpsman for combat train, there was the option to also go to a line company. And I had friends with the line company. I forgot it was either India or Lima company. I couldn't remember. And because we had some attachments that came from the hospital, brand new, just young corpsman. And HN Padilla went with the line company, and I went with combat train. And a few months in, his truck got hit, and his entire truck didn't make it. And I remember dealing, and still at times I deal with survivor's guilt, because that was supposed to be me. I was literally supposed to be in that truck. If I wasn't given a different option, I could have chosen to be in that truck. And I've worked through a lot of different things, but that was one of the things that, even when his anniversary comes up and I see it on Facebook, and is a reminder of what God saved me from.
Well, you bring that up. Where was, if any, was there any pressing in from God at this point, or was it?
Oh man, I was a praying fool in Iraq.
Was it a foxhole prayer, or was it?
Oh yeah, you know, being a part of combat training, so I was always in the back seat of a vehicle, and I prayed often. And I remember I would pray things like, "Lord, if you allow me to get home, I'll serve you." And I didn't when I got home, but I got a tattoo after we returned, and it came to fruition years later. So I got a tattoo in 2006 on my ribs. This is "Once I was lost, now I'm found," and it has a picture kind of me with my shirt off. There's flames all around me, money flying around. But then there's a book that's open, and it just simply says, "Jesus saves."
Get out.
And I didn't get saved until 2010. Like, I wasn't seeking the Lord at all. But I created this, like, this was my design. This is something that I went to the tattoo guy, and I said, "This is what I want." And he drew it up, and then I was like, "This is what I want. I want the words almost not legible. I want you to write it so small to where you have to really get up close and look at it and see what it actually says." And me gaining weight has helped to make it even more obscure.
I thought you were going to say you can read it better now. It's expanded things.
But yeah, I got that right after Iraq. And then shortly after, like my life got turned upside down. My best friend, the guy that literally sat next to me in every mission, committed suicide. And he was like my first real friend, the man that I considered my first real friend. Like, he wanted the best for me. We wanted the best for each other. You know, our families were starting to like talk to each other on the phone. We were, we started this really close brotherhood from training through Iraq. That's all I had. I didn't have much. He got married in December of 2006. I got married in December of 2006. So we couldn't be at each other's weddings because we were getting married right around the same time.
So you were both out by then?
No, they're active duty.
You're still active?
We're still active duty.
Okay.
This was after deployment. We've come back. He got married the first 30-day cycle. I got married the second 30-day cycle after we returned. The beauty of like our friendship, I didn't understand it till later, because like he was the first one that he protected me. He made sure I was good. He challenged me. We talked about deeper things. We talked about family, talked about future. But he was also the one in my first marriage. Like, I had a filthy mouth and I didn't care. And I remember I said something to my ex-wife in front of him, and he just grabbed me and threw me on the couch and said, "You will not talk to your wife like that in front of me." And for some people, that would break a friendship. but it solidified it for me. Because one of my rules for a friend is that friend can't be afraid of you. He wants the very best in the face of everything. And he was the one that showed me. He was willing to destroy our friendship to show me what was right. And when he committed suicide, it was after he found out that his wife had been cheating on him with a Marine that he trained. So, you know, there was a really dark period for me for, what year are we in? Like 2003, 2023. So from 07 to just a few months ago, where I just held him in such a unhealthy way. Veterans Days, Memorial Day, his birthday, his death. They were such dark days for me because I put him in a place where he had no business being. And I remember my therapist said, she asked the question. She's like, well, why do you hold on to Andy like that? And I remember I paused, and it was after a few sessions, and I just said, what if it's not him? And it was just like the weight fell off. All the weight that I carried for his death, the survivor's guilt, and all those different areas just fell off of me in a way that it's kind of hard to describe, but it was literally like a weight. And
we're going to get into more of that. Let's go back to first marriage. And
so first marriage, and you know, I go and out of fear, you know, I didn't want to. We had this crazy battalion commander that was like, look, call your family, let them know you're not gonna make it home. I don't want you guys having any ideas of what home is gonna be like afterwards. I need you focused, and within 3 months we're supposed to be combat ineffective anyway, so most of you guys may not make it home, so call your parents and let them know. And we were like, roger that. And for some of the Marines that had already been on deployments, they understood the mindset. And for me, I heard it, and I was just like, that's the first time I felt afraid. You know, my young teenage years, probably 13, 14, 15, I had a really good friend that we just understood each other. She was really cool, whatever. And that fear of dying alone made me want to rescue her. She had been through some stupid relationships and things, and I had asked her to marry me. And I was too much of a coward to tell her, like, right before I got home, like, this isn't a good idea. Like, I was literally drinking Hennessy and smoking weed steps away from the altar right outside of the church because I was too afraid to say, this isn't right. I don't want to marry you. We can be friends, but this isn't right. So our marriage lasted about 3 months. Because right after we got married, 3 months later, Andy died. And it just ripped my entire world apart. So that was my first marriage. But we didn't get a divorce. We were just separated. We didn't get a divorce for like 7 years. She had medical conditions, and she got to keep my insurance. Right. And I just didn't know how to pursue all that anyway.
Gotcha.
So this is a strange... ignorant. Like, I was just ignorant of like what was needed. So
did you go to another deployment?
Yeah.
After that?
Yeah. So got back from Iraq. We had our leave cycle, and then we started ramping back up. And we were supposed to go and push in Afghanistan, sea to shore, hovercrafts, and all that good stuff. So we did all that training, and then the intel for us got kind of messed up because our intel team got hit, and so we didn't push in Afghanistan that way. So we floated around on the ship, went to different countries, and, you know, got to see, quote unquote, the world for a little while. And we got home, and prepared for another deployment. And my body had started breaking down after Iraq, and on that deployment on ship, I started having these bouts of like weakness in my legs and spasms, and as I started noticing something was wrong, and so I didn't go on that next deployment where they actually went into Afghanistan, and I came back actually to Maryland, to Bethesda, Maryland. Now the hospital is called Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and now I had an opportunity to work with the Wounded Warrior Project, which is really cool. But that also meant my job was to monitor casualties and KIAs of those that are in country when I had my friends there. So every day I would go to my computer looking at the list of names, and sure enough, some of those names became very clear. Some of my friends were flown in to Andrews Air Force Base, and so it was really surreal. But I had an opportunity to keep working with the Marines. That kind of helped like keep things glued together. So I got to wear my camis, and even though I was on blue side, I got to do a lot of work with the Marines. So it was really cool. A lot of craziness.
So how did your military career sort of wrap up?
Oh, what I didn't tell you was in Iraq, I got court-martialed, insubordination in a combat zone, and so I took rank, took money, and I went from being one of the top corpsmen with a cap package on the board, which is a meritorious promotion, NAM with valor on the sergeant major's desk, to being an E3 again, and those awards going away. But Chief Buchanan, he couldn't give me a NAM, but he wrote 2 red letters of achievement for me for the work that I had done, because he didn't want my deployment to seem like it just came to nothing. So they were able to give me 2 letters that hopefully one day when I get my sea bag and everything back from my really good friend, I'll be able to see those things and kind of patch up some holes that I have in my memory from my military career. But because I got busted down to E3, it messed up my timeline to make rank, because I was already at year 5. You have to be an E5 by year 8. And I had to make E4 again, which I did. But then I had to wait a cycle. And by the time I was taking E5, it was the last test before I got out. And I missed E5 by 5 points. 2 weeks later, I was abruptly detached from the Navy.
Just like that?
Just like that. No matter what I did, no matter all the good, it's just a number, just a name.
So a lot of people tell me, and I'm interested in what your transition from active duty to being out looked like for you.
I was lost. I mean, I didn't really have a transition. I was going to work one day, and the next day, once the test results came out, it was a complete shift. It was, all right, you gotta process out of the Navy. You got physicals and things you got to get done. You got to apply to the VA and do all those different things. I thank God though that I understood that process, because I had already helped Navy corpsmen and Marines process out. So I knew what I needed to do. So I got it all done really quickly. However, when you wear that uniform for 8 years, you know what you're going to wear, you know what you're going to do, you're going to shave, you're going to have a specific haircut, you have specific responsibilities. You have all these things laid out in front of you, and then they say, get out. My drinking was off the charts. I mean, I was drinking like a 5th of Hennessy a day and a 40, And it was just this constant, like, drink fest. That's all I did was drink. And I was in a relationship at the time. And it started to get really, really bad because I couldn't handle my drinking. And
where were you living at this time?
I was in Germantown, Maryland.
Yep. Okay.
And actually,
Funny, a part German guy living in Germantown.
well, the funny part is my sister-in-law lived 2 blocks away from me. I never knew because I didn't know my wife then.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first time my wife took me to her apartment, I started looking around. I said, I know this area. and then I looked up, and I remember we got into the house. I said, I forgot the apartment's name now, but I said, is such and such apartments right up the street? And she said, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I used to live here. And we just kind of looked at each other. For the second time, I could have crossed paths with my wife or her family, because when I was in Bethesda, my wife was at Georgetown.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but that transition was tough. I went on interviews, and the only interviews I could get is like insurance salesman. I've never been a good salesman because I don't like lying to people. I'm gonna tell you for real if it's junk or not, if you need it or not. And I kept failing the test, and it was just like really breaking me down. I failed the test, and that's why I'm out of the Navy. I failed this test, so I can't get this. And my girlfriend at the time, Stellar Corman, you know, she had finished her pharmacy tech school stuff. Like, she was on track to do what she needs to do. I think she's an officer now, actually, and remarried and doing really well. But I remember she got called up for a deployment during this time, and the fear of just not knowing caused me to just leave her and her daughter, who I was helping to raise, abruptly. And it was just like, I can't do this because of fear. The second time that fear has either made me make a choice that was going to like suck or really derail some things. And but that's when my life changed. That last bad decision. I've made other ones, but it was like since then. But that decision landed me on the couch of my really good friend, Jason Vaden. And it was after some binging, drinking at a party, and going crazy at his house that he woke me up one Sunday morning. And he said, hey, man, like, meet me out here. Grab some cigarettes. Let's talk. And he said, look, man, do you remember last night? And I'm not going to go into specifics, but he was just like, dude, I don't know who you are anymore. Mm-hmm. He's like, you've always drank. We drink together, but like, you become something that I don't get. And his fiance at the time, she comes out, and she's like, Kennedy, we love you, but you can't do that here. And he said, you have 2 choices. You can either get up with me, get cleaned up, and go to church this morning, or you can get out. And I looked at him, and the first response in my head was like, all right, I'm out. Like, I've been kicked out before. But I loved him so much, and I respected him, that when he said that, like, it pierced me deep. And I went to church. I was reluctant, but I went. And I think we've all heard the story of like somebody going into church and it feels like the pastor's talking directly to you.
Of course, yeah.
Right? But like, this pastor's like 6'9". He comes out in a Jordan jumpsuit with some fresh J's on. I'm sitting all the way in the back, and he's looking at me. Like, I even tapped Jay, and I'm like, yo, Jay, is he looking? He's like, yo, bro, he's looking dead at you.
Yo, bro.
he's like, bro, he's looking at you. And I don't remember the message, but I remember sweating through my clothes. And I remember going back out on his balcony later on that day, and I said, all right, I'm done. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'm not drinking anymore. Like, I'm done, period. And he's like, okay. He's like, what about smoking? I'm like, oh, I can't drop everything. Like, you know, like drinking is big enough. Like one step at a time. I said, but I got to figure something out because like if I'm going to change, I can't be around the same type of people. So I called the only strong Christian that I knew. And her name is Asia. She actually worked for me when I was in the Navy, when we were working for the fleet liaison. Really good friend of mine. And I called her up and I said, hey, I went to church. And she's like, what, you went to church? I'm like, yeah, I went to church. And told her the whole spiel. And I said, like, tell me about Jesus. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, like, I don't get this. So I sat in a car and she told me over the phone about Jesus. She said, look, why don't we do this? Why don't you come to Bible study with me this Wednesday and you can learn about him? I said, all right, bet. Cool. She takes me right back to the same church. And I'm like, I'm looking around. I'm like,
you can have that guy stare at me again.
I'm like, yo, I've been here before. And she's like, yeah, when? I said, man, when Jay brought me here. And I don't remember the Bible study. But this was an African church. And they were so loving and they just were so welcoming. And I was like, this is cool. And I was like, well, like, how did you stay so pure? Because you hung out with us, but like you didn't go to the places that we went. You would come to our like gatherings, like at our homes. But when things got crazy, you would always leave. And she said, I had boundaries. And she's like, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I got to follow him in a way that's going to be pleasing to him. And so shout out to Asia for like teaching me some things early on. And, you know, I had an idea. I was like, maybe if I can find a young lady, maybe she can show me.
Show me Jesus.
Show me Jesus. And as crazy as it sounds, I found a young lady that showed me Jesus.
Online, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I flew out to California and she showed me a totally different life. And her name's Keisha. And Keisha would later sacrifice a lot for me to become free. And we went through a lot in our relationship and there was a point in our relationship after I was saved. Like this woman opened up her life, got me linked up with her uncle, who's the pastor, Pastor Derek Fields, and they nursed me back to health because I was a very broken man, and it was through that relationship. I'll never forget December 17th, 2010. I flew in to Southern California, and I broke down in her front seat and said, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I don't want this life anymore. There's got to be something different. And that Sunday morning, December 19th, 2010, I went to a small church down the street from USC and called True Fellowship. And I sat in the back pew. I used every tissue in that church, literally. And there was an altar call. And I went forward, and I don't remember what Pastor Fields talked about, but I cried my last tear in that mindset. And my life changed drastically from that point on. That was 4 days before I turned 26 years old. And there was a complete 180 from that point. Like people talk about lives being changed, and they look back over the years and like, wow, like no. Something happened that day that changed my mindset that day. No more drinking, no more smoking, no more cursing. Like it just fell off that day. And then I started a fast. for 35 days. December 25th of 2010. Because within that church, they did a fast in January. Very common fast, right? I said, no, I need to start now. Because the pastor said, I need you to focus on 3 things. I want you to seek God in 3 areas during this fast. And he had us all write them down. I said, I want to know who Jesus is. I want to get rid of this anger. And I want him to heal me. So I still had a lot of physical ailments. And 2 weeks into that fast, audibly, I heard a voice say, get up and go run. And the fear gripped me just for a moment, because the last time I ran, my last PFT in the military, my physical fitness test, I barely got across the finish line and collapsed and was on bed rest for 5 days. And I ran for about 35, 45 minutes, and I came back, and all I could do was cry and scream, hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. It's no pain. No pain. No ache in my lungs from smoking a pack a day. No, nothing. And I remember calling Keisha at work, and all I could say is gone. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, it's gone. And she kept saying, what are you talking about? I said, the pain, it's gone. And she was like, and I explained everything that happened, and she was just like, this is a Jesus we serve, what he can do. And I got to see miracles happen in those 35 days within my body and my mind. And it was at a huge cost that I had to be willing to give, because the Bible tells us you better count the cost. And I didn't know what it was going to cost me, but it cost me everything. All my friends, all my family, because I was in Southern California by myself. I changed my number. None of my Marines, none of my corpsman buddies, nobody. People thought I died.
You just ghosted everybody.
Everybody.
Yep.
But it saved my life.
Man.
It was a life-changing experience. December 19th, 2010.
So, what was the next pinnacle moment for you? That's a big one.
I got divorced finally.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had been in discipleship with my pastor, and we were walking through all these different things. You know, the forgiveness of my mother, the forgiveness of my biological father, my stepdad, having my mother come live with me because she got tired of the abuse, and I finally go pick her up, and July 15th, 2011, my world got turned upside down again. As my stepdad died 7 months after I gave my life to Christ. I remember laying down on the floor, and I called Pastor Fields and I said, why would he take my dad from me right now? If he loves me so much, I just gave my life to him. Why didn't he give me more time? And he said, yeah, I don't know how to answer that.
That's a great answer.
However, it is in these times you're going to find the most comfort if you seek him. Psalm 91 became a staple in my turbulent times where I would read it. And sometimes I would read over the words, and there would just be words, but there would be so much comfort in just knowing that in the darkest times that he's willing to cover me. And I felt like during that season, he just covered me. But then he also showed me how many other times he covered me. He would give me glimpses of different areas in my life where he covered me. When I was a child, even before then, when my mother was kicked in her stomach when she was 8 months pregnant with me, and they couldn't find my heartbeat. And instead of letting them rip me out of her, my stubborn mom, love her to death. I love her to life, because that old mom is not who I have anymore. But that stubbornness saved my life. God covered me through my mom, who was grieving the death of her sister. But all the different decisions that I made throughout my life, there was different coverings. There were different times. There were times when I should be in jail, or I was driving drunk and I would wake up somewhere. Or find myself in a club and there's a riot going on and I have people whisking me out as if I'm some celebrity or something. They're just protecting me. But that was all God to get me to that point. He allowed me to go through all these different areas because I kept choosing not to surrender. And he said, okay, I got something for you. And when I felt like I came to the very end of myself and hit rock bottom and broke through and hit the most painful time of my life, he changed my life. And then when I thought I had it together, he pulled the rugs right out from under me and said, you will trust me and me alone. And that's what I learned from my dad passing. Is no matter what's going on, God wants us to trust him. And if we're willing, he'll take us through. He'll bring us out. He'll show us what he really has for us in ways that will blow our minds.
So after, that's definitely one of those, what would you call it, a moment where you can doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Question.
Oh, and I questioned.
Yeah.
And I doubted.
And those times are really cool because, no, they're not really cool. No, that's not good terminology. I guess there's two things you can do. You can quit or you can press in.
I was ready to quit. I've been a quitter my entire life. Whenever there was something tough, I'd rather just stop. I won't quit on people, but I'd quit on myself. I fight for people, but I wouldn't advocate for myself. And I remember my pastor told me that. He was like, you got a decision to make. You're either going to press in or you're going to let this eat you alive. And I remember there were so many different things going on that it was just Psalm 91 being read over and over and over again. And sadly, I should have it memorized by now as many times as I read it. But there was a comfort. There was a comfort in it. And his word became like my place. And I would ravage his word. And I would read and read and read and read and pray and pray and pray. And I would pray fiercely as if I was at war. And many mornings, we had a 5 a.m. prayer. I would yell and scream, and I would let everything out. And it was always directed, like, at the enemy. I hate the enemy. I hate Satan with everything I have. Because what sin has done, one, to this world, but what sin has done to my family. And I would fight in the spirit with everything I had. And I remember people would say that lived in my home, it felt like the house was shaking. So it helped me to see like what God would have me to do for him in his kingdom and his fight for others properly.
Properly.
Yeah. So I learned how to pray during that time.
And you also were serving in the church, right? With Pastor Fields, right?
Yeah. I was like his right-hand man.
Yeah.
I was with him 5-6 days a week, anywhere from 3 to 8 hours a day. Discipleship was key to my development. I learned how to do everything new. Dress, talk, carry myself, because I always had identity issues. I always try to figure out, where do I fit in? And he He said, you're not called to fit in. You've been called out. He has a voice for you. He has his posture, everything. And he was one of the first ones that told me, he said, you're biracial for a reason. Because you're never supposed to be all the way left or all the way right. And he's going to use you to work in the middle. And all the different things that he taught me about how to read the word, how to pray, how to serve, how to surrender, how to die daily, what it really looked like, the lessons that I learned from his experience, his mountaintop prayer times at 3 a.m. and his prayer times that would last hours, his singing, his writing, his teaching, his passion for people. Like, God brought me to a man for the first time that I was able to surrender to. And he was shorter than me. He didn't grow up in the hood. He wasn't a gangbanger. He was an actor, a singer. You know, like he was a gentle man. And nothing like what I grew up with. Nothing that I idolized. I idolized strong, big men. All my friends were big guys. And he wasn't. And he showed me what love looks like what real love could be.
So we've got to be getting near a time where some young lady shows up into your life.
Yeah, she didn't show up until 2013, my wife. And it's funny because this was towards the end of my mom being at my house. She met a man who is now her husband, who has been a true godsend in my life, in her life, in our family. And she found him on a dating app. And I would clown her, you on a dating app, mom, for real.
I know where this is going.
Right? And and I remember one day I was sitting there and I was like, I'll try it. Let's see. It was the app was called OkCupid. Now listen. All right. Don't go out there trying to get on this app trying to find your husband or your wife. God used that in my life. That doesn't mean it is how he wants you to do it. But he used that. And I was on there for a few weeks. And I had met this young lady on there and we had been chatting or whatever. But there was another profile. I read through the profile and it was the first time I think I admitted that I was terrified of a woman. I felt this small. She didn't have a picture though. So I was like, man, I don't know. Cool. You know what I mean? But then she messaged me and we were messaging back and forth. I said, hey, the conversation's great and all, but you don't have a picture up. And I didn't know she didn't have a picture up because of the line of work that she was in. All right? She was already working on her double master. She's working on her PhD. She had all this stuff in her profile. So it was a way to protect herself, all right, her identity. So she sends me this picture, and I was very specific to God. I gave him a laundry list of what I wanted out of my wife, and one of them was huge. It was key. She had to be 5'6" or above. And so the young lady that I was talking to before I got the message from my now wife, she was 5'8". She played sports. She was a new believer. And that was a red flag for me. I didn't want a new believer. I didn't want to have to cultivate someone. I wanted somebody to partner with. And we started talking. I remember we met some weeks later, November 22nd, 2013. We met at Starbucks. And I saw her drive by after I saw the picture, and I could tell she was short or whatever. She told me how short she was, but then when I saw her in person, I was like, dang, she's real short. However, for those that know my wife is larger than life. And it was in that moment, I remember we were trying to find each other because she parked somewhere, then I parked, and then we kind of just met. But I saw her, she was walking away from me. She was walking in the wrong direction, so I only saw her from behind. And I saw her, and one of the things that caught me was how she walked. She has this confident swag. And I was like, she's little, but she's confident. And she turned around with a smile on her face. And when we locked eyes, I was like, this is the one. We talked about everything. I did all the talking.
Shock.
I did like 6 hours. And I laid out my entire life.
You just let her have it.
I let her have
here's
it.
where it is.
And at the end, this is what I said. Can you handle that? And she looked at me and she said, you know my doctorate is in clinical psychology, right? And she said, yeah, I can handle that. Not knowing the turmoil that she was experiencing because she had a list of qualifications for her husband. And some of the ones that were complete red flags, complete no-nos, were part of my life. I'd never been faithful to a woman. I'd never, all these different things. And she went home to her roommate, and she was like, I think this is him, but I'm struggling. From that day on, I think every day we prayed, not knowing we're praying the same prayer. Lord, if this is not the one, please remove them from my life. And not long after that, I introduced her to Pastor Fields, and I had him, evaluate her. Now let me say this. Before I got on that dating app, months before, I asked my pastor if I was ready to date, and he said no. So I didn't pursue anything. And I needed his approval because he saw me from a different angle, and he knew where I was. And one of the things he told me when he finally said, I think it's time that you can begin looking. Like, don't just go out there dating everybody, but go on, see what's out there. He said, now you understand where you're headed. Before, you didn't know where you're going. So why would you get involved with a woman and you didn't even know where you were leading her to? And it wasn't until I got to a point of maturity where he said, now go and find a wife. And I found her in a very unconventional way because I was so entrenched in ministry and building my boot camp company, and I was still in school. And when he met her, he was blown away by her. And most people that meet my wife, just her, she has this power, this sense of just like, she knows who she is, she's confident, but yet she's very standoffish, and some people can rub the wrong way by her. But my wife is one of the most loving people I've ever met. And it really wasn't until Pastor Fields' wife, Debbie Fields, told me what I needed to know about my wife. When I finally asked them to meet, now this was months. We'd already started marriage counseling. I'd already asked. I was old school with it. I asked her parents if I could have her hand in marriage. I'll never forget that, on FaceTime. And her parents wept because I wanted to honor her. We didn't do everything right. I'm not saying that. But I wanted to do it the right way, the best I could. And Debbie Fields, we were at a friend of ours' birthday, and I said, so what do you think? They had just met. And she said, she's awesome. However, I'm afraid she'll never be able to utilize the tools that she actually has. Now, if you're willing to bear that burden with her, she'll be great. I didn't understand what that meant, but I was willing. And I've got to see my wife become who I knew she could be in so many ways. And it's been so beautiful. I'm so glad that I went through and I jumped through all those hoops and I talked to the different people, and I had different people talking to me, different people talking to her, and I invited people into our relationship. And it prepared me. I didn't think it was going to be as rough, but it was. And I see my wife in ways now that only prayers years ago could have prepared me for. And a year to the day, November 22nd, 2013 is the day we met. And a year to that day, December 22nd, 2014, I married my best friend, my ride or die, the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with, the one that I want to go on trips with, the one that I'd rather be with at any time, more than anyone. And the one that gives me the most gray hairs. I married her that day. And
yeah, but you know, I had the blessing of sitting in a small group with you last night and watching you clasp her hand.
Yeah. There's been a shift, more in me these last maybe like 5 or 6 weeks. There's been this.
Well, let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. So, y'all get married.
Mm-hmm.
And how long ago? Was that 2013, you say?
2014.
14.
Yep.
Man, you're getting old.
I know. I know.
So how long were you in California?
So we got married in 2014. And then a few years after that, I felt like the Lord was giving just tugging on me to move to Easton. And it started because of her dad. Like, her dad's different. He doesn't have a squeaky clean life. Actually, he's got a very colorful history. I fell in love with him. I love him. And I remember coming home from a visit and I said, and I looked at my wife and I said, I love your dad so much. And I want to be there to help him. And I started praying. I said, Lord, if there's any way that I could be there for him as he gets older, to just be a son to him, to help him in whatever way, I'm willing. And a few years later, we were talking. I forgot what we were talking about, but we weren't talking about anything about our parents. In the mid-conversation, I told my wife we're moving to Easton. And it was weird because we weren't talking about anything about Easton or anything like that. And she was like, well, where'd that come from? I said, I don't even know. It just like came out of my mouth. And she's like, well, go make sure. So I fasted and prayed. And he's just like, get ready.
That's really cool. She said, make sure.
Yeah.
Now, I give her a lot of credit for that.
Oh,
Because, you know, moving back to your family for a lot of people is a great thing.
Oh, yeah.
But she knew enough to say, make sure that you heard from God. It's not just a feeling.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't the first time.
And at the same time, you took it seriously. You didn't go, hey, you know, I know. It was like, now I'm going to fast and pray about it. That's neat.
Same thing when I was going to ask her to marry me. I said, we were talking one day, and I said, I want to marry you. And she said, go pray about it. And I told her, I said, I already have. I fasted and prayed. You're my wife. And I remember I had to tell Pastor Fields that. And I didn't have a timeline yet. But it was like 2.5 years before I actually left. And then he gave me a timeline of when. And it was crazy because Jenny was finishing up all of her schooling. She was doing her last internship. Her last day on an internship was, I think it was August. Does August have 31 days in it?
I think
right?
so.
Yeah, right? Sure. Last day of August, she was done. September 1st, we flew out. With 2 children, across the country, not knowing that she was pregnant with our third. And I mean, I heard everything from, I had a great career. Jenny had a job offer right after she finished up her internship, and money was great. And we were finally getting to this place where things were going to be that much better for us financially and everything. But I had gotten to a point of outgrowing the ministry that I was at. And it wasn't because the ministry wasn't growing. It was because we just weren't aligned anymore. And it was just like it came to a head, and we left. And I mean, I heard everything from, are you sure that's what God said? You sure you don't want to just leave? You know, you have a good job right now. You have 2 children. Like, why would you want to? Because I didn't have a job here. Like, I was just coming because I believe God told me to. And I heard everything from the inside the church, at work, and everybody. And we decided that we were going to follow God. And we did that September 1st of 2018. We moved to Easton, and there was a culture shock. And then we're here. I mean, there were a lot of other bumps and things, but it was through pain that I found you, and you helped me to understand that there's a difference between working for God and serving Him and His people. And the last, and we've been here almost 5 years, and we've been a part of Oasis over 3. So there's been an amazing journey to get to this point, and to be honored and given responsibility to help lead this ministry after everything that I've been through just only reminds me it's been God the whole time. You know, in every area that He's for me, He's for us when we allow Him to, and even when we don't, He'll get His will done.
What I love about you, I love a lot of things about you, but I love the fact that you didn't run, because you talked about your life being a lot of running.
Yeah.
And as I heard this narrative, this theme going across, I heard a battle inside the home, battle outside the home, to go into actual battles.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as though your battle the past couple years has been the internal one.
Oh, yeah.
And there's been such amazing fruit out of it. And when I tell a lot of people is, it's like, you know, do you make mistakes? Do I make mistakes? Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
But one thing I can say, that till this point, you've always ended up trusting God and doing what God is leading you to do. And like you said, I really believe that. I don't think I've heard that saying before. A good friend doesn't fear you. Mm-hmm. But your willingness to hear some hard things and not run away from it. Mm. I know it's not fun.
No.
But to not run away from it and not to just go, check, I'm out, bounce.
Yeah.
Is one of the character traits that I love about you. And it's sort of like when I talk about, you know, you've always said you've got my back. Like, I feel like I've got your back, because at the same time, I know I'm going to make some mistakes and you're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do that together. And I find it's funny how things go around, because I was a youth pastor and Jenny was in a youth group. You know? I knew Jenny when she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And here you go. Here's this Oakland guy.
Yeah.
And you end up in Easton. Culture shock.
Big culture shock.
But I'm so grateful for you.
It's been good. I have found my true self these last few years, but in the last few months, there's been this different. Like I really know, understand, and hold fast to me being a son of God. I don't have to prove anything else to Him. He loves me. I think that's what's been the biggest shift in just lately for me, is really grasping that and receiving it. Because we can hear it all day long, and we can say it, I'm a son of God or whatever, but I'm starting to really understand what that means. And it's helped me to see people differently, even just in the last few weeks. There was a song that Rob Horner presented to us in the beginning of our group, and it's been like an anthem. It's called Who I Am by Ben Sutler. And like the fighting to try to be had to be like dropped. And now I just feel like I am. There's no more needing to prove anything. I don't need to try to find a daddy. I have a daddy. And he's given me brothers and father figures and people that love me. And like I'm at a set, like a new depth of peace. That some people think I look tired just because, like, no, I'm just at peace. I don't feel like I have to prove anything anymore. I just want to love people. And I hope that my story opens people more to what God is able to do. But also I hope that if they didn't see me the way that God sees me, that they would hear my story and they would understand why I may do what I do. And in the sense, give them behind the scenes to my heart so that they understand when I say I love you, that I'm there for you. That's exactly what I mean.
Absolutely. You do mean it. And I've seen that, and so have many others. And we are very thankful for your friendship and your partnership in the ministry. And, so you and even Christopher in here, there's so many other people who have kept me afloat, holding up the arms, so to speak. And so I do hope I know people will hear your story, and I appreciate your vulnerability. Like, it's not been easy. It's not. And I've said it a lot. We have this little boy inside of us that's always looking to do enough. And I think you're heading to the place where, it feels like our hands are released. Just like I got nothing to prove. Matter of fact, I can't prove anything. So Jesus, you've been there and you're there for me.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to pray with you and as we wrap up, but it's been a good time, man.
Oh yeah.
It's been a good
Great time.
Lord God, thank you for this time. Thank you for Kennedy's willingness to be here and just share his heart. And Lord, I know there's more in there and more stories and more battles. But God, thank you that you have proven to be the perfect father to him. God, and I thank you that you have brought other people into his life. And Lord, I thank you for his dear wife and children and the blessing they are to everyone that is around them. Lord, so we are just thankful. I pray you would fill him, continue to fill him with your spirit, Lord, and just fire that flame, keep it just burning in him, and that you would use his gifts to your glory and for your renown. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. God bless you, Pastor.